Welcome welcome everyone. So excited to see so many friendly names in our attendance list today, and to be able to be sharing community with you virtually. A couple of pieces of technical information. We have a live captioning happening today. To turn it on, you go to the bottom of your screen and click on a little button that says CC live transcript. It gives you two different options for viewing the live captioning today. If you have any technical questions or need technical assistance, you can direct your questions to the panelists in the chat. If you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Looks like two little dialog boxes and says Q&A, and we'll have some time at the end today to answer your questions. My name is Jess Watcott. I'm an assistant professor of women's studies at San Diego State University. I am a white person with dark curly brown hair and wearing a gray button-up shirt. And I have a very colorful window on the side of my screen. I'd like to welcome you today to the Bread and Roses Center Feminist Research Colloquium hosted by the San Diego State University Women's Studies Department. It's part of our speaker series that we've had this semester on the topic of feminist disability justice. I'd like to thank the San Diego State University College of Arts and Letters for sponsoring this event, and the Pride Center for sponsoring access today. I'd like to thank our interpreters, Elise and Jojo, and I will attempt to speak more slowly to help them do their work. I'd also like to thank our captioner, Aaron, today. Thank you for being with us. I want to start today's event with the land acknowledgement for San Diego State University. Although I recognize that we're all joining from different places in the world and on Turtle Island, as the event's being hosted by SDSU, I'd like to share this acknowledgement, which was composed by Mike Connolly Misquish. It says, for millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. And I also want to affirm and acknowledge that land acknowledgements are important, but highly inadequate to the work of decolonization. Welcome so much today to our third Feminist Disability Justice event, featuring Leah Piepzna Samarasina. Our second panelist, Alice Wong, may be joining us a bit late, and the event today will be moderated by Joseph Stromando. Invited our panelists today to speak to the life and work of Stacy Park Milbern. She was someone who lived and breathed the concept of disability justice, a concept created by queer, trans, working class, and disabled people of color to articulate a holistic vision of crip thriving. And we wanted to host this event today to celebrate her theory and praxis and to deepen our understanding of what it means to organize for disability justice. Leah and Alice created the Stacy Taught Us syllabus, borrowing a hashtag which was created by the Radical Monarchs, which is an activism group for young girls of color. The syllabus puts together many of Milbern's influential speeches, essays, social media posts, and roundtable comments, highlighting her work with numerous community groups, including Sins Invalid and the Disability Justice Culture Club. And I'll also be posting links to both of those organizations that I just mentioned in the chat, if you'd like to contribute in Stacy's name to either of those organizations that are continuing to do really essential and important work. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Joseph Stromando. Thank you again for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Joseph Stromando, and I am an assistant professor of philosophy here at San Diego State University. I am so honored to be able to play this role in today's event. Stacy Milbern was a close friend of mine. We met way before I was a philosopher, I think around 2006 or so, when we were both much younger. And so she has really been formative for me throughout my progress as a thinker and as an activist in sort of disability space. And so I'm so happy to be here. But enough about me. I want to have the pleasure. Oh, I should also say my visual description. I am a white man with dwarfism that has a dark beard and thinning dark hair, and I have on a vintage 3E Love T-shirt that has the wheelchair heart sign in gold, as well as black as its base color, and behind me is a white wall and some curtains that are sort of tied up to not be too distracting. So with that said, let me introduce our speaker here. Sorry. So Leah Lakshmi Piepsna Samarsina is a queer, disabled, non-binary femme writer and disability and transformative justice movement worker of Berger Tamil, Sri Lankan, and Irish Roma ascent. They are the author or co-editor of 9 books, including most recently with Egeris Dixon, Beyond Survival, Stories and Strategies from the Transformative Justice Movement, Tonguebreaker, Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, and Dirty River, a queer femme of color, dreaming her way home. She is lead artist with Sins Invalid and a member of the program team of the Disability and Intersectionality Summit. And you can follow them on Twitter at THELLPSX or at brownstargirl.org. And I am a longtime fan of Leah's work. And so I am so excited to be in conversation with them today. So thank you for being here, Leah.
Thank you for having me, Joseph. Do we want to read Alice's bio too, even though she might be kind of missing right now?
I'd be happy to do that. Sure. I have that on hand, of course. Let me just pull it up using sort of multiple screens over here, trying to organize myself. So Alice Wong, she, her, is a disabled activist, media maker, and consultant. She is the founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project, an online community dedicated to creating, sharing, and amplifying disability media and culture, created in 2014. Currently, Alice is the editor of Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century, an anthology of essays by disabled people, available by Vintage Books in 2020. And you can find her on Twitter at SFDIREWOLF. And hopefully she joins us soon.
I'm texting her. This is such a full moon in Scorpio crypt time moment.
For real, for real.
Cool.
So I think if I'm seeing right, Leah, you would next do your audio description of yourself.
Sure. And I'm seeing in chat that somebody's saying, does Leah have a mic? Her speech sounds so distant. Is this sounding better for people who can hear? Pretty clear? Nothing, anything. Joseph, people, yes. Okay, perfect. Me speaking loudly is usually not a problem. So hi, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Leah Pieprzna. I'm gonna wait to let the interpreters catch up. Oh no, wait, looks like maybe.
I'm kind of agreeing with that one comment. I'm having a hard time hearing you. You do kind of sound like you're in a tunnel. Sorry.
Oh, funny. It's the exact same as I have my volume turned all the way up.
We'll do our best.
Thanks. And did we do the access announcement for how to turn on the chat? Not the chat, the cart?
I'm not sure. I thought Jess was going to do that at the beginning. I'm not sure.
I can say it again. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a button that says live transcript. It's a square with 2 C's in it. If you click on that button, you have 2 options to either have subtitles on the screen or to have a full transcript on the side.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. I'm seeing comments saying I need a mic. I don't have one right now, so I think we're going to just go ahead and I'm getting kind of mixed feedback from people that some people can hear me, some can't. So I think we're going to do the best we can, and hopefully using CART and ASL can be a hack if there are folks who are having a hard time hearing stuff. I'm somebody who uses CART because I have auditory processing disabilities, so I'm always really happy that that's there as an access hack. Going back to my audio description, I am a light brown skin, kind of sand colored person with curly purple and brown hair on one side of my head, purple glasses, an earring that says, you might not be able to see it, but it's an image of Sylvia Rivetta, who, when she was living on the piers on the West Side Highway of Manhattan back in the 90s. And I'm also wearing a shirt that me and Alice Wong made, which I will just flash you with, which is a purple shirt that has the names of all of the women and non-binary characters in season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. Because Alice and me have done a lot to push the super fandom in disability justice community towards Star Trek Discovery, and I believe that Star Trek Discovery is disability justice. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay, so I guess we should lead off with our first question. So the focus of this speaker series is introducing people to disability justice. And so, of course, no better a time or a way to do that than to talk about Stacy's work. To honor queer, trans, working class, disabled people of color who are who have and are still articulating and imagining this idea. So Stacey Park Milbern is someone that many of us have looked to for theorizing and implementing disability justice. And so some folks in the audience, of course, might not be super familiar with Stacey Milbern and her legacy. And so could you talk to us a bit about her life work and how it exemplifies disability justice?
For sure. So the first thing I want to say is that Stacy was a working class Southern, deeply spiritual, Asian, mixed race, femme disability justice organizer who started her activist work as a young person in her late teens. So when I think about her work and about how I would explain who Stacy was and her impact to somebody who didn't know her, I would say that all of those identities are crucial, and you can't know her unless you know all of them at once, that they were operating all at once. And she brought all of those things to what DJ is in the process of being. So fun facts, some of which I figured out after she died. She was born on May 19th, shout outs to being a Taurus, which is the same birthday as both Malcolm X and Yuri Kochiyama, Kochiayama. And like both those people, she was a deeply radical organizer with an expansive revolutionary vision. But when I think of people who remind me the most of her or who I'd compare it to, I think of Ella Baker. So for people who don't know, Ella Baker was an incredible Southern Black freedom organizer in the 1950s and 60s. And one of the things she's most known for is a quote where she said, "Strong people don't need strong leaders." And what she meant by that is that she believed in what is often called facilitative leadership, which is really different than what's known as charismatic leadership, which is usually a cis guy on a podium making a big speech. And she was someone who just went small town to small town and really just listened to the everyday poor and working class Black folks in those towns and was like, what do you want? What do you need? And really deeply believed in their importance and their leadership. And, you know, Stacy really did not want to be seen as a leader of disability justice. She, you know, she did not have or want to have she had a Facebook, but she did not want to have an Instagram with 40,000 followers, you know. And some of what I treasured the most about her was that something that was a cornerstone of her organizing was that she had this fundamental belief that every single disabled person, like every single one of us, especially those of us who are not the one disabled person who gets to go to Harvard or who's the one disabled person that all the able-bodied people know, but disabled people who are especially, you know, developmentally or intellectually disabled, poor, young, rural, not living in a big coastal city, Black and brown, institutionalized, people who've been told all of our lives that we are not capable of being leaders or organizers, that we have nothing to contribute, that we're just clients. She fundamentally believed that we were all geniuses and we all had really critical things to contribute, and that we just needed to be witnessed, to be supported, to be believed in, which can sound like some inspiration porn stuff, but she really meant it in a way that was drastically different, and she practiced it. You know, we started using the Stacy taught us hashtag that the Radical Monarchs came up with, and it's a beautiful hashtag. I love it. And I think recently a friend of hers said, you know, it's a great hashtag, but it's more like she would say, we're learning and building this together, right? Like she didn't want to be the Jesus of the movement. Like she wanted to be someone who facilitated through, and she did, through all of this. And I think the thing I was going to say was that she did a lot of high profile stuff. And I'm just going to list a few things. Everything from her early work as a young person with the Disabled Young People's Collective of Fayetteville, North Carolina, which made bookmarks with disabled Black and brown people in them, like Curtis Mayfield, and went into public junior high schools and did radical disability education about Harriet Tubman and Frida Kahlo and all of these people. To her work with the Azolla Story, AZOLLA, which was an online, you know, very Web 1.0 message board group that was a space for disabled women of color to meet each other, which is where I met her. Going on to her work with Creating Collective Access, Sins Invalid, the Disability Justice Culture Club, Power to Live, co-writing Bernie Sanders' disability platform for his 2020 campaign. She did all this high profile stuff. But the stuff that I want to lift up, which a lot of people knew, but people who didn't know her might not, is that she did a million more things that were listening, building relationships, supporting people, helping people figure out what they needed to be able to organize. I remember the time that I was having a panic attack and missed my train to go to a training we were leading in Portland. And I was just completely in autistic meltdown. I was just like, I fucked it all up because you're zooming in and I'm the in-person person. I failed. And she was like, yeah, so what if we treated your anxiety like any other access need? And I was like, wait, what? And she was like, yeah, so what do you think that would help? And I was like, in 25 years of facilitating, I'm somebody who has both neurodivergence and physical disabilities. So like a lot of people with that schneer, we've kind of been taught, okay, you can have a fucked up body, but only if you're real smart and on it, and you never also have a neurodiverse access need, you know, because that's like letting down the group. And then she was like, no, like, we're just gonna work it out. Your neurodivergence is part of why you're a good facilitator. And I was like, it changed my life. She did all of that relationship building. And I'm going to say that to me, disability justice is insistently a horizontal movement of people who often are seen as nobodies by other movements, who are just like the one little disabled, poor brown person and wherever they are. Because of that vision, because she was like, it's all of us. It's not about 3 celebrities. It is about all of us as weirdo people who've been too disabled for the movement. And we're, you know, I was talking with Leroy Moore where we were reminiscing during a lot of the ADA 20 stuff last year. And we were kind of like, it should also be disability justice 15, because that word was invented in 2005. And it was taking us back to, we were at the Allied Media Conference in 2010, and Leroy and me and Patty and Stacy and Mia and Naima Lowe and probably some other people, we just were like, let's have a disability justice track of workshops. And we were like, fuck, the world's so different. And it took me back to when it felt like 10 years ago, there was just 25 of us who were radical Black, brown, and working class white, queer, and trans folks talking about this intersectional, not academic and not disability rights model of disability justice and how the world's changed. But it also specifically took me back to the workshop me and Stacy threw, which was an Azola story writing workshop, where we were like, yeah, are you a queer or trans disabled person of color? Let's make a zine. And I remember just being in this room and she was just like, okay, so if we were to write our disabled, queer, and trans people of color stories, what would they be? And the chalkboard just filled up, you know, with everyone just took a breath and was just like, okay, we've never had space to do this before because disabled spaces have been so white and POC spaces have been so abled, but people were just like, sure, yeah, the Hiawatha Asylum for Insane Indians, pesticide poisoning, like, you know, this, that, and the other, you know, Harriet Tubman, Frida Kahlo, my grandmother. And I just, that moment, I was like, this is what's going to build the movement. It's not imposed from the top, it's all of us with our stories. Last thing, because Alice is not up yet, I would say that I really wanted to lift up Stacy as a youth organizer, because I saw her get infantilized a lot. You know, she had a baby face, she was a small fat person, she was Asian, and you know, people would call her baby Crip sometimes, and I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, she's a genius, and why are we talking shit about younger people anyway? I'm 12 years older than her, but she taught me probably more than I taught her. You know, she dualed me and mentored me into so many parts of loving myself and into disability organizing skills. And to me, I was somebody who came into activism young, as like a lot of people. And as I grow in middle age, I just want to really lift up that so much of her vision came from being such a badass youth organizer who worked with other badass young disabled people, including especially folks in the self-advocacy movements in the South. There's so many other autistic folks who are like, Stacey's such a cousin, you know, how come? And I was like, because she built with other D/ID and or autistic disabled young people in the South. And she never talked down to us. There's someone I know who, I hope this is okay to say, who is doing a lot of work on Stacy as being someone who brought plain language to other disabled spaces that didn't necessarily center that, right? And I could go on and on, but that's some stuff for now. And I'm gonna see if Alice has not texted me back. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do our best. Just, I mean, if I could just respond really quickly to some of what I just heard, there was a lot. But one thing that I picked up on was your story about neurodiversity and how she responded to your meltdown over missing the train and your anxiety, and how she sort of reframed that as an access need. And I that spoke to me a lot. Because I remember one of the conversations I had with her that had a huge impact on me was we were talking about the medicalization of disability and the way that diagnosis sort of plays a part in people's identities a lot of times. And so Stacy and I were talking specifically about whether or not, or whether or not to, or why to or not, sort of disclose specific diagnoses in sort of various public spaces that are part of the CRIP community. And what she said to me that made a whole lot of sense was it's not about sort of the medicalization of your experience. It's not about the label or the diagnosis that you might have, but we don't need to know those words about you. What's important is your access needs. It's all about, what do you need in order to be included? What do you need in order to have equity within this space and participate within this space, which is a completely separate question from what your diagnosis is. And it's also much more intersectional, because this question of access needs might have something to do with disability. It might have something to do with other parts of your identity that intersect with disability. And so that was just sort of a story that came to mind when I was working with Stacy and some of her organizing efforts, and sort of how that came through in my experiences as well. Okay, so let's move on to this next question, I guess. So you created the Stacy Taught Us syllabus using a hashtag from the Radical Monarchs and compiling a lot of Stacy's writings and interviews. And so I was wondering about some of the themes and threads that go through the syllabus and through her work in general that you can track. What are some of the key questions that she asked? And what are some of the key interventions that she made through her thinking and writing and work?
This is so funny. I wrote out my response, and as you're saying the question, I'm like, I should have read the question better because I didn't really answer it. But key threads. I'll just preface by saying that so me and Alice co-wrote the syllabus, and we just did it. When she passed, we were all, I think, just so many of us were just in shock. We had not seen that one coming. A lot of us, Stacey had huge plans. We really were like, she's going to get her cancer surgery and the tumor's finally going to come out. And we're going to, we had just been talking 3 weeks before where she was like, you want to write a screenplay for Netflix? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, you want to be about queer and trans people of color with disabilities? And I was like, yeah. And we were, she had a lot of earth sign power couple friends, and we're both Tauruses. So I swear to God, she was like, she figured out ways we could work together, because she's like, otherwise you're just going to be like watching TV and eating chips in bed, just like, and this way we can, also hang out. And I was like, yeah. So when we put together the syllabus, I think that for me, I've just seen, like a lot of queer people of color, we've seen the thing where when somebody dies, especially unexpectedly, their cultural work just disappears, right? Because a lot of us don't get to choose our time of death, and there can be family members, like with Langston Hughes's family, that locked up his work for years and was like, he wasn't queer, to lots of other examples. So, and we just also, it wasn't just us, there was a crew of people that was like, let's just, she wrote novels on Facebook, so let's just make sure we copy and paste this stuff just in case Mark Zuckerberg does something where it all goes away. We preserve this. And Stacy herself, in the piece that we co-wrote in Care Work, Crip Lineages, Queer Futures, she has this whole section where she talks about how hard it is to find disabled lineages. And she's like, yeah, what are your choices? FDR, the kid from Glee, that's what you get. And so I think that was, really, I just was like wailing in grief, but I also, in that moment, I had that desire to make sure her writing got preserved. And I also was like, okay, I have a certain kind of autistic bionic brain where Stacy's writing is one of my special interests. And we shared, a lot of our relationship was as writers together. So I was like, oh, I can go into archive.org and do screenshots of her Crip Chick blog, which she took down. And I also just, I've got a good brain for minutia of radical publishing. So I was like, I'm remembering this piece she wrote in this radical parenting anthology that came out on PM Press in 2010. We're going to put that in. I remember this piece she wrote on femme and being a disabled Asian femme that was in an anthology called Persistence, Still Femme and Butch, which came out a decade ago. So in terms of threads, I would say that one thread was, I often there's a thing I think a lot about disability justice, which is that we're kind of on a bridge where we have both the intensely practical, nitty gritty how to and the visions and the dreams and the future tripping. And I would say that's something that was in Stacey's writing. A thread in her writing was immense practicality. Like that piece that I mentioned that's in the anthology, Don't Leave Your Friends Behind, which was like a radical parenting and care anthology that came out on PM Press. It's just called Accessibility. That's the title. And it just is her being like, it goes through every kind of accessibility from, you know, plain language to wheelchair access, to font size, to childcare, to food, to timing, to, you know, to seat size, to fat access. And it's just written really simply. It's 3 pages long. And it just goes, okay, here's what you need to know to put on an accessible event. And you can fast forward 11 years to her work as part of the Power to Live Coalition, where I believe that was part of the syllabus during the wildfires in 2019, where the PG&E was like, oh, cool, we're just going to shut off power. If you have a ventilator, well, good luck. She was part of this immense, brilliant organizing effort that kind of overnight was like, okay, we've mapped out places where maybe the power won't be shut off, that you can go to this person's house and plug your chair or your ventilator in. And we've also come up with how to use a ceramic glazed pot and dry ice to keep your insulin cool. We've also figured out, like, here's how you can turn down the charging on your CPAP or your ventilator or other, you know, really crucial medical devices, so it uses less power. Here's things to look at with generators. So that kind of practicality, there's a quote that I want to read from later where she talked about, you know, access is so important, and also I get frustrated because it's just what we need to get in the door. But she knew that in order to organize and dream, we also needed to live. So there's a practicality part. And there's also, I would say, deep grounded vision, you know, where she would tell stories from her life. You know, I just remember reading a post that she wrote on the To the Other Side of Dreaming blog, which was a blog that she co-wrote with Mia after she moved out from North Carolina to the Bay, where she was talking about being in her wheelchair at a cafe and being able to move around, you know, more independently, and being in a Bay Area community where there were more disabled people out and about because of Medicaid expansion and things like that. And also really being such a fierce Southerner and being like, I'm not saying fuck the South. She's like, I feel so conflicted about leaving, and I'm Southern with all my heart, and I'm for and with my Southern disabled community with all my heart. She had a lot of like dreams and a lot of bringing them into the present. And it was all, I would say another thread was like really sitting with the questions. Something I appreciate about Stacey is that she, and I think this might jump into some of our conversation about the question of disability pride, or is it more complicated later, is that she was really not afraid to not make things pretty and simple. Like she really sat with like, here's where it's complicated. Here's where we screw each other over. Here's where I don't know the answer. You know, here's where I'm sitting with a lot of contradictions, you know, and also not stopping there. I think that's super important because I think that something that Ijaris Dixon and me have said a lot in terms of our book, Beyond Survival, which is about transformative justice, is we're like, we don't think that you do anyone a favor who's fighting for abolition by pretending it's going to be easy or simple, or that there aren't going to be moments where we don't know what the hell to do. And I feel the same way about disability justice. Like we can't just, I'm working on this piece called Interdependence is not a giant that lives in the interdependence is not a giant that lives in the hillside that comes down to the towns to talk to the townspeople, which is a riff on a Most Def line. Because I've seen people sometimes be like, interdependence, like it's this superpower that'll just fix it. And I'm like, right, interdependence is a pain in the ass, complicated, messy, and exhausting. And it's also still better than the alternative. So yeah, Stacey, she was real. I think that's the final thread I'll say for now. Yeah.
Awesome. So I think at this point I wanted to pause to give you an opportunity to read an excerpt from some of Stacey's work. So I'll let you do that for the audience.
Absolutely. Okay, so and for people who maybe have a copy of Care Work who want to follow along, I'm reading first from the epigram, that's Stacy's quote at the beginning of the book. And then I'm going to read from some of her pieces in our co-interview. Excuse me, I'm burping. Crip Lineages, Crip Futures, which is chapter 18. So this is an epigram, and everyone kept being like, where can I find that? And I was like, it's on her Facebook. She wrote a novel on Facebook. I have loved disabled people of color my whole adult life. And I'm still amazed to discover that the more I love our people, the more I remember where I can't come from. I remember that my ancestors found each other out, seeing each other in the unseen. My ancestors knew that asking after one another and making sure that folks had what they need, what we might understand as collective access, was the only way to be together. Together, the best shot at staying alive. My ancestors knew the power of vulnerability and how to hold each other in dignity. My ancestors knew joy. My ancestors made mistakes and meditated on who they wanted to be in community. My ancestors became those people. And if I cry, it's okay. So I'm gonna move ahead to Crip Lineages, Crip Futures, and the first bit I'm going to read is in response to a question I'd posed to her, because she had just talked about this idea of crip doulas, D-O-U-L-A. Thank you for saying I can cry. I appreciate you. On Facebook. And I was like, you just blew my mind. Say more to our audience. And this is what she said. Stacy, I see a lot of disabled people of color doing a ton of work in supporting people rebirthing themselves as disabled or more disabled. This can look like a lot of things. Maybe learning how to get medicine, drive a wheelchair, hire attendants, change a diet, date, have sex, make requests, code switch, live with an intellectual disability, go off meds, etc. The transition of becoming disabled or moving along the ability spectrum is frequently invisibilized, to the point that these changes don't even have a name. We do not have a way to talk about becoming disabled or more impaired. And I feel like society not having language to describe this transition or the support it requires speaks to the ableism and isolation people with disabilities face in our lives. Of course, there aren't yet words for this. Without CRIP intervention, we are frequently left alone to figure out how to be in our body minds and in this ableist world. CRIP mentorship or coaching or modeling at its best is disability doulaship. We, you and I, are doulas. I'm thankful for every person who's trusted me with the honor of supporting them through their journey. My survival and resilience have depended on it. And then I'm going to skip ahead. So the question was, what are some moments of birthing ourselves that we want to describe? And she said, Zora Neale Hurston said, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. To be honest, I'm in a year right now of completely being undone. I'm having a hard time with higher levels of daily pain and faster bursts of my progressive neuromuscular disability advancing. I have always had a progressive disability, and I know what's needed to adjust myself to a big lifestyle change, i.e. becoming less ambulatory in 6th grade, becoming a parachair user in 10th grade, getting a trach in 12th grade, etc. But it's still so hard and painful, and this time it's harder. I'm having moments where I'm the closest to all of these edges I've spent my entire life avoiding. Edges of grief, edges of pride, or things I thought I'd never do, edges of shame. And somehow I'm still hanging on, sometimes even dancing on the cliffs. Like the time last week when I was crying in a hospital bed and alone, and instead of having a pity party that none of the chaplains could relate to my experience, Spirit found me and I preached to myself the words I needed to hear. Or also last week when I was terrified to be alone after getting out of the ICU, instead of keeping my anxiety to myself and being in terror, I found my mouth telling people the truth. I'm so scared, and asking them to stay and sit or stay and sleep. I had 24/7 support the first 84 hours after the hospital, The sense of being a burden still burns hot in my throat, but the necessity of the moment triumphs. There is nothing more crip than crip practicality. I'm riding an avalanche and won't know how things will land until I crash to a stop. That requires support, a lot of support. Rebirth me, oh wait, hold on. Just as I'm learning to let myself have support and learning to be compassionate to myself, I'm also learning to let myself grieve. I let myself go in the low. I give myself a window of time to stay there, and then I come to get me out. I give myself reality breaks. I spend a lot of my time watching fantasy movies where people transfigure or get to leave their bodies via avatars. I watch them over and over. It's okay, that's my jam. These body minds of ours require a lot of us. We can be imperfect. We can cope with shitty things that get us through. I'm thankful for whatever help you get in your life. Rebirthed me always has new priorities. I let them guide me. This time it's to live life with my disabled love as much as we can with the time and health we have, and to let the spirit transform me through this experience, that I may be of use to my communities and people in a way I wasn't before. Everything else forms around these things. Pain and loss clarifies. Sometimes crip life is crystal clear. I know how I want to live in this world. I fight to be here. And there's another section on page 251 where she's talking about growing up the child of evangelical Christians and being prayed over as a kid and having people be like, oh, you must not have prayed enough, you're still disabled. And one thing that some people don't know about Stacy was what a radical Korean Christian she was. You know, at one of her memorial services, there was like 2 preachers and 1 Korean shaman. And she also loved her tarot cards. And she brought it all to the movement. She brought so much faith to the movement. And I will definitely probably cry for this one. Okay. I've done a lot of work on my faith, and surprisingly, I've come back to believing in God. My faith is a huge part of my resiliency practice because it answers a lot of my questions. I know disabled people are perfect as we are because I believe we were made by the same hand that made flowers and mice and dogs and stars, and they are perfect as they are. I know God wants us to strive for justice because God is love, and justice is what love looks like in public. Cornell West. I don't know why suffering happens, but I know it hurts God, and I feel the divine's presence with me through loves who join me in the hard moments. Can I read a little bit more, or should we?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a little bit more would probably be okay.
Okay. Let me see. So I'll just read 2 more short bits. So we were talking about this concept of crip wealth, where she said, I feel like even thinking about crip wealth is so crip itself. I see disabled people every day thinking of ideas abled people never would have, primarily by focusing their time and efforts on using what they do have and the space between, rather than putting our attention on the limitation or lack of ability. It sounds a little like inspiration porn, but we do come up with wildly imaginative solutions this way. I can ramp a 3-inch step by taking off my sneakers and rolling over them. I've seen blind friends do wicked things with text-to-speech in their ear. My friend Leroy Moore taught me that one way Harriet Tubman was able to scout so many routes is by using her traumatic brain injury and talking out loud to herself because people would brush her off as a crazy woman. Texting, now used by everybody, was created as assistive technology for deaf people. I save so much time sometimes letting strangers in public assume I can't speak. We have so much at our disposal, and most of the world has no idea. It can give us a big toolbox to play with. And this is a piece that's on page 255 of Cure Work, if you've got it, where she asked, the question was, what haunts you about ableism? She says, I feel heavy with the weight of our longing. Sometimes it haunts me, all of the dreams of our ancestors, disabled people currently living and disabled people yet to come. There's so much I want for us that we want for ourselves and each other. Every person I've ever met in an institution, a day program, a sheltered workshop, on the street, on the bus, anywhere, has wanted and deserved so much more than the world has given us. I feel immense privilege and responsibility for everything I have access to, and it haunts me how many disabled people do not share the same access, even to basic things like a person to talk to who cares about you, or choosing the place you live, what you wear, eat, who puts their hands on your body. When I first moved to the Bay, I had a lot of survivor's guilt. The life I was getting to live that loved ones I knew wanted and deserved the life I was getting to live that loved ones I knew wanted and deserved just as equally, but did not have. And I want to read something. This is the real last thing. It's from her Facebook, where she said, "Sometimes I feel impatient about how much ableism has forced us to emphasize accessibility, to get people to pay even a modicum of attention to it. Collective access is revolutionary because disabled people of color and disabled people in general choosing each other is revolutionary. In many ways, access should not be a revolutionary concept. It's the routine, everyday part of the work. It's only the first step in movement building. People talk about access as the outcome, not the process, as if having spaces be accessible is enough to get us all free. Disabled people are so much more than our access needs. We can't have a movement without safety and access, and yet there's so much more still waiting for us collectively once we build this skill set of negotiating access needs with each other. Tonight, I'm taking time to appreciate and enjoy access as a communication of our deepest desires. When my new friend makes their house wheelchair accessible so I can come over, a whole new level of safety and trust opens up. When a love takes initiative to reach out to event organizers to make sure my buds and me can fully participate, that's thoughtfulness and also political commitment in practice. When I eat dinner with dear ones and they know which spoon or cup to grab, that is attunement. When I can ask a friend to move my body, it's because I know they want me to be comfortable out in the world. When I can do the impairment-related parts of my routine around someone, that's intimacy. It's a gift of letting each other into our most private worlds. Feeling thankful for access and interdependence as an opportunity for us to show up for one another, and also for crypt spaces that give us a taste of what can take place when we have each other. I am so hungry for us to be together. I am so ready for what is around the corner. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Leah. I think that, those selections were really powerful, and really ran a full gamut of just thoughts and emotions, from some of the really hilarious stuff that she wrote to some of the deeply wise things that she said. So I just wanted to recognize that and thank you for sharing those things with us. But the show must go on, I guess. And so we have a third question here prepared. One of the last writings in the syllabus is a speech that Stacy gave in 2019, in which she declared, "We are the ones we have been waiting for." She clarified that she doesn't mean this in an individualistic, pull yourself up by your bootstraps way. How do you understand this concept, and how did Stacy practice this motto? How can we keep the spirit of Stacy's thought and practice alive today?
I love that question. Well, first of all, I just want to make sure to mention that "We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For" was first written by disabled Black queer bisexual poet June Jordan, because Obama started saying it, and then people were like, "Oh, he said it," and it's in the Handmaid's Tale promo where like June is going, "We're the ones we've been waiting for," and I was like, "Oh my God, do not rip off June Jordan, do not rip off Black women." But I think it goes, she also quoted Oprah in that speech where she said, "Nobody's coming to save us." And the moment that I realized that is when my life changed. And she shared that moment in the speech in the context of a story she was telling about where she was living with her family in North Carolina, and they were working class, and North Carolina did not have Medicaid expansion that paid for care attendants. So she's like, yeah, I was watching my younger siblings go off to college and I couldn't. I went to a local school because that's, you know, my family was who took care of me. But I also was, she was like, my family loved me, but I was living closeted in the South. I was like turning around gay books and leaving secret messages for people. And that's when that quote hit her. And I think to me, I'm telling some of the story around it because it speaks to, you know, how do I understand the concept? How does Stacey practice it? I think number one, it's really, again, going back to that sense of like, whoever you are as a disabled person, particularly as a disabled, multiply oppressed person, there's not somebody out there that's smarter or better or more capable than you who's going to figure it out. Like, it's really revolutionary for us to choose ourselves and each other. And part of that is to be like, oh shit, I know what my community needs. I know what I need. I have my own disabled superpowers. I also have my disabled shit. I just messed that up. Let's learn from that, you know, type of thing. I think there's something, I feel like I'm just kind of beating a dead horse, but there's something really radical in saying that disability justice is a movement of quote unquote nobodies, you know, we are people who, as she said, come up with stuff that the abled and the white disabled and et cetera could never come up with. And it's from those secret inside disabled stories and spaces that we make magic happen. And I think I found, actually, I'm going to read a Facebook post she made in late 2019 in terms of the question of like, how do we keep the spirit of Stacey's thought and practice alive today? It's a post that I love that I see people reposting where she was really breaking down, when we talk about disabled organizing skills, here's all of the different ways that here's some of the different ways they could be. So what she wrote is, we are in a climate crisis. There's no way to know the specifics of what happens next. It makes sense that we all will be called into the unknown, needing to do things we have not done before. Please move out into it with us. Here are some organizing skills to sharpen so the women and femme organizers in your life don't have to do everything. Approach people for money. Have a sense of how much you have and how much you need. Make decisions about resources. Write grants and do gigs. Host dinners to get to know people or bring people together. Keep a mental log of people who are looking for work and people who are hiring. Keep a mental log of people who are looking for friends or dates. Introduce them. Vouch for people. Take your referrals seriously. Provide emotional and mental health support. Build relationships with organizations. Befriend the people in your organization. Remembers people's surgeries, cats' birthdays. Sorry, she loved my cats. First days in a new job. Ask people to slow down. Provide care work or help people find care workers. Fundraise and collect resources for people. Pump the brakes if something doesn't feel right. Be the heavy, the messenger, the boundary keeper. She used to tell me, she's like, you're like the bouncer and also the welcoming committee of the movement. I was like, sometimes, yeah, I'm trying. Bring up hard topics. Encourage people to approach each other if they have a conflict. Give a pep talk. Write about the work. Create the social media. Represent your group. Speak on paddles. Respond to the emails in the group email box. Respond to the direct messages. Problem solve. Hear people's negative experiences and apologize on behalf of the group. Create the agenda. Check or create access. Demonstrate what having fun looks like. Take photos. And she said that to be like, there's so many times, I think, period, but I've seen it, especially when people are in, God, I don't know how many times I've met disabled people who are like, well, I'm not really in the movement. And I'm like, nobody's really in the movement. We're all these little people in our chair or in our bed trying to figure it out. And people are like, well, somebody, I think especially now that disability justice is 15 years old, there is a sense of like, well, like I get it, where people are like, you're the DJ organizer. And I'm like, no, I'm this cranky bitch on a heating pad, just like you. And where people often feel like, no, like somebody else, like we're kept away from leadership and we are told over and over again that we are not competent, and the only way we can be viewed as competent is if we pass as abled. So everything she just said, she's like, those are a million different ways that you can contribute to the movement, and they're all real, and they're all real ways of being an organizer, not just because disabled people are doing them, but because they are these invisibilized, not real activism, I'm doing air quotes, very often feminized forms of organizing that are actually what movements are built out of. A lot of the ways that abled movements are exclusionary and ableist are because they don't look at who's doing all this emotional work, who's throwing the dinner, who's being like, oh wait, you need $300, let me hook you up with this DJ 101 gig that I don't want to do. Who's being like, hey, you white racist person who was really fucky to somebody, you actually can't come to the meeting for a minute until we talk to you about what went down. And there's like and she listed out these 2 pages of things, and she was like, that's just some, what would you add? And then people popped in with more stuff. So I think the TLDR is, to really look at what we're already doing and to know that we already have skills, and to really know that those are real and they count, and to practice them, and to know, I'm going to say something I say a lot, which is I'm like, the DJ movement is not just something out there that exists. Like, you can be a part of it if you put up a sign in a cafe, or you start a Facebook group, or you talk to your one other chronically ill friend and you go, what do you want to do? And you figure out something to do. And I think that that's how we live her work and her politics. I think deep accountability, I think pleasure, I think vision, I think a lot of times we're in this ableist scarcity where I think that's changed a lot because of DJ, where you can now find a lot of disabled BIPOC radicals on Instagram and wherever, but for a long time, and still it feels like, oh, all we can do is a very narrow form of policy work, or all we can do is stuff at the local Center for Independent Living. And not to shit on either of those things, but to actually be like, no, we can actually demand the complete destruction of the medical industrial complex that murders people, including Stacy, just gonna say it. We can demand more than just some lukewarm, bare minimum rights narrative that leaves most of us out. We can demand we can look at everything from land back to reparations as disability justice struggles. We don't have to fucking settle for like a hangnail of disability access. Like, fuck that. If we're all gonna die young anyway, we might as well go for broke. Sorry, I'm in a mood. I don't really mean sorry, by the way. I see people in chat being like, don't apologize. And I'm like, no, don't worry. I'm not actually apologizing. Yeah, that's what I got. What do you think? How do you think that, how are you thinking about that question, Joe?
Yeah, so I think that you covered a lot there. One thing that really pops out at me though with that specific quote is the we, right? In that it's we are the ones we have been waiting for, is so important to Stacy's life and work, in that you sort of brought to the foreground in an earlier question her leadership style, and how it wasn't about being sort of the charismatic individual with the microphone. It was about um, building bridges and helping people, as sort of this disability doula, to sort of come into their own disability experiences and join sort of what they have with what others have to try to make a better world. And so her emphasis on community, I think, is what I keep on coming back to with a lot of these questions, and the ways in which, I think most fundamentally, her work was community building. It was sort of looking at how disabled and multiply marginalized people can come together and be stronger together in community, and doing all of these things, everything from maybe you could talk a little bit. I never actually got to see it, but maybe you could talk about her house, and that's something that comes to mind when I think of Stacy's community building work, and sort of the house that she had bought and constructed or remodeled. I don't know if that's something you'd be prepared to talk about for a minute.
Yeah, totally talk about that. Yeah, and for folks who don't know, the Disability Justice Culture Club is now it's a collective of disabled Black and brown people, but it also was this house that Stacey bought for herself but for herself and community in East Oakland. And she bought it, and then in the summer of 2019, there was a whole fundraising campaign that was started by her and friends because, as a lot of people know, when you buy a house, it's mostly not accessible. And then when you have to make, put in a ramp or a lift or anything, it costs a lot of money. And there's a lot of gatekeeping from, permit people. And, she got really screwed in a lot of ways, and she did not have that much money. So one thing that is important is that we joke that house was bought, like we raised I forget, it was somewhere between 10 and 20 grand. And she was like, yeah, there was a few rich people, but it was mostly people sending $5 or $20 in the first 5 days of the month after they got their check. It was really a house that was, it was the house that Cripps built, and it was complete grassroots fundraising because she was like, this is my house, but it's also going to be a community center. And from jump, it was like, first of all, she was like, yep, there's going to be other disabled BIPOC folks who need accessible housing living there. I was only able to go there once. I'm so grateful I was able to visit there with her in January of 2020 before she passed. It was the last time we saw each other. And I was just like, girl, you got a living room that's like as big as a ballroom. And she was like, oh yeah. And from the beginning, she was just like, we've had everything from like Korean community groups coming in to make dumplings and celebrate holidays, to Poor Magazine had a huge training, to, I'm blanking, but there's an Oakland-based social justice political education group. I think the Center for Political Education was putting on, I'm blanking on the name, but they were having meetings there because it was an accessible space. And there was room for like multiple power chair users in the space and a bathroom. And there was room for like 20 to 40, 50 people at a time to hang out, and this big kitchen that was accessible. And we had an incredible meal that Patrice from the DJCC cooked. Hi, Patrice, I saw you in chat a while ago. I hope that's okay to say. And she just hit the ground wheeling, and she created that as a space where she was like, I remember seeing an Instagram post that the Disability Justice Culture Club made called Home is a Holy Place, where they talked about, for us as disabled people, home is where we get to take the mask off, we can be as we are. And it really speaks to her disability justice politic, that she was like, we don't need another nonprofit or an institution. Our homes are already where we organize. They're not always our safe places because we get abused and we're living in inaccessible housing and we don't have care attendants and what have you. But when they are, they're beautiful. And she was like, let's make a space where we can hang out, eat, gossip, have fun, and organize. And that's what it was. And I think that the way that she was so bold and so just crip innovative in, it's one of the million ideas that we have that able people would never, in being like, this is a model. I've seen disabled folks I know across North America who are already, we already had our little, knew that our homes were like community hotspots. A lot of us saw that as that role modeling of the Disability Justice Culture Club, and we're like, okay, we're going to step up. Like, hey, thanks for the language. Our homes are our community centers. Like, we already knew it was real, and now we know it's more real. And like, let's organize from those places. And COVID's complicated that, but I know that for me, my home is not wheelchair accessible, but it is fragrance free, and it's neurodivergent safe. And there's been a lot of building in community here over the last 5 years where we've had gatherings. We figured out, okay, especially post-COVID, we're like, well, there is a paved area outside in the garden we can all hang out, like no matter what our mobility is. And I think there's a way that she was, as Janet Mock coined the term, a possibility model, and that disability and her home was a possibility model of like, your home is already where you organize and come together. Like, just know that, and just like up it by like 30%. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. She really, not to get too inspiration porny, but she did exactly that, right? She inspired by example, and gave us sort of some fertile ground for our imagination to think about how we can do this work of community building with the spaces that we already have. Okay, so I think that next we want to move on to the Q&A. If people have questions that they want to ask, please use the Q&A function with Zoom. I believe Jess, are you going to field the Q&A questions?
Yes, and I just want to respond to someone's question about breaks. The event is scheduled to end around 5:30, so we are not going to be having any, I think we're just going to power through for the next 20 minutes, but please definitely, take care of yourselves and your needs. And the event is being recorded. A link will be sent to you at the end of the event if you missed any part of it, or you want to share it with someone. Look for that link in the email that you use to register for the event in a couple of days once we've processed it. So there are a bunch of great questions, and I just want to pull a couple of them out where there's some overlapping threads. One of the questions has to do, a cluster of questions has to do with talking to disabled community about racism and also talking to queer community about disability. And I don't know if you have any insights into strategies that Stacy used to, bring together disparate groups, or ways that she framed these intersections that either of you would be welcome to speak to.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to go? I feel like I talked your ear off.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, I can speak about sort of how she spoke to me as a white person about race and disability and the intersection of those two. I'm not sure that I'm able to give anyone advice about how to do it, but I certainly sort of was on the receiving end of that many times. In that, through our friendship, Stacy was just very direct. I mean, and so I think she really relied on the good faith that we had built through our friendship and our relationship that was, many years long. And so, to trust that I would be receptive to talking about white privilege, in that I would be receptive to talking about intersectionality. And I learned about these things from Stacy prior to Black Lives Matter and sort of all of these other things that have happened in our society and culture since then. And I think that for her, I'm not sure how she did it sort of on a mass scale, but sort of on the individual level, it was very much about sort of relationship building and speaking truth, even hard truth, to someone that she knew she was sort of in relation with and had that kind of connection with beforehand. So I don't know if that answers the question. Maybe Leah can give us more.
No, I think that was good. I feel like I'm hesitating a bit because I'm like, I feel like I can't speak for her, but I will just share that what my experience was with Stacy was that in a lot of our work together, we didn't really focus on, white people. And in fact, there's a couple of times as our kind of consulting, pairship relationship took off, that some pretty major disability rights organizations would be, there'd be some incident where they showed their ass in terms of being racist, and we would get a DM that's like, can you come in and teach us how not to be racist? And we would just be like, no, we're not interested. And I think that that's a lot of what is the power of disability justice, and it's complicated to explain because people were like, well, is it an all Black and brown movement? And we're like, no, like we both have, white folks we work with and, are in our lives, totally. But I think the thing we really focused on was that like we wanted to center and build with disabled Black, Indigenous, and people of color first, because we knew that, one dynamic that happens in disability community is that it's very easy for white folks to take over, and not know they're doing it. Or maybe they do know they're doing it, but it still happens. And then we were like, it reminds me of the stuff she said about focusing on our strengths and our abilities and our brilliance, not on what we don't have, but really focusing on our crip skills. Part of that was we were like, we're going to focus on our energy and our spoons on building with other Black and brown disabled folks, because that's complicated too in so many ways, including that, something that we touched on a little bit was that like a lot of Black and brown disabled folks, this is changing, but can have hesitancy about identifying as disabled because we're already facing so much shit. And we've been taught you can't admit that you have a need or a vulnerability or you're going to be murdered or not hired for the job, So we were like, we're kind of focused on working with our kin that are definitely disabled but may not feel comfortable using the D word, including because of maybe they've run, the disability community they've run into has been so white. We're like, we're going to focus our energy there. And that kind of shifts the paradigm a bit, where I've seen white disabled radical folks learn from disability justice, but they're like, kind of been in a place where they're like, I can just, I don't have to center myself. I can read what you guys put out. I can listen. I can witness. I can figure out how to be a support person. I can talk to other white disabled people about their racism. I can, I can do all that. So I think that's important. And a thing I do want to speak to is the movement building work that she did with Black and brown communities and people in Oakland and elsewhere who aren't necessarily disabled. I had been in the Bay. I moved to Oakland in 2007 and I lived there till 2014, 2015. And when I first moved there, it was early in DJ and I was kind of passing in some spaces because I was really active in queer and trans people of color art spaces. But I kind of was like, hey, I'm not in a flare anymore. I'm in California. There's a lot of organic food here. And when I am in a flare, I'll just stay in my room and not talk about it because I want to be with the cool kids. And anyway, like my experience early on was that you said disabled to Black and brown queer people in Oakland. It was kind of crickets, And it was really heartbreaking feeling like as disabled Black and brown people, we kept trying to bring up disability issues and those groups would just be like, whatever. And I don't know how she did it, but Stacy did a lot to build with not predominantly disabled BIPOC groups. I'm thinking about her work with Kat Brooks's campaign for mayor, right? Where she really, I think it was a lot of conversation, a lot of listening, a lot of being really direct, a lot of showing up. But I think about the ways in which Kat Brooks's campaign really then centered disability justice. Or I'm thinking about, this is like the first year of Trump 2016 when he was like, oh, I'm going to deport everybody. I'm going to, fuck the DREAM Act, etc. And there were huge marches of undocumented folks. And I remember seeing a video of one march and this like 15-year-old undocumented brown kid on the mic was like, hey, so we brought all these chairs at the front of the rally and those are for disabled and or elder folks. And if you're not talking about accessibility, you're not talking about the revolution. And I was like, I'm gonna cry. And then they were like, normally we'd burn sage, but we understand that some people have disabilities where scent makes it inaccessible. So we're just gonna hold the medicine. And I was like, yo, this is huge. And I think conversation, I think not being firm, but also not acting like, not just kind of accepting that, oh, people are going to be ableist, but really understanding the particular dynamics that can stop Black and brown folks from being able to really look at how ableism plays out in our communities. Something we talked about a lot was like, when you're doing disability work with Black and brown folks, you have to you're going to be unpacking a lot of painful histories because even abled Black and brown folks are like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about my family members that got poisoned by pesticides doing farm work, or I'm thinking about my uncle who was institutionalized, or medical abuse and experimentation. These are incredibly painful, racialized, disabled histories, right? But if you go to our communities and you talk about those things and you hold space, then there's room for shit to shift, right? Or I mean, I'm even thinking about a story I was told recently about how now there's the Hand in Hand campaign, which came out of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which is like a coalition effort between disabled folks who work with caregivers and the mostly immigrant, mostly women of color who do that work to fight for rights for both people on both sides of the spectrum. But I was talking to someone who was like, oh yeah, 10 years ago, we were fighting for minimum wage for, caregivers, and a lot of the white disability rights orgs in our state came out against it. And I was like, see, that's the difference between disability rights and disability justice in doing coalition work, right? It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It can be coalition politics where everybody wins. Boom. Oh, we got 10 minutes left because, yeah.
That was an amazing answer. I loved it. One of the questions which I have to ask, because this is an academic organization hosting this event, is do you have any thoughts on how people working in academic spaces can bring in, Stacey's thought and practice, and disability justice writ large in a way that is not co-optational but collaborative?
Sure. Yes, I do. Joe, do you want to go or should I go? How do you want
I want to hear your answer.
I mean, first of all, I just want to think about fight for free tuition, fight for the rights of employees and staff, fight for the rights of students, fight against the corporatization and precaritization, is that a word, of the academy. For starters, I also think, as she said, access is just the beginning place. It's not what gets us free. But I had a brief moment being the coordinator of the D Center, which is the Disabled and Deaf Student and Staff Center at UW. And I'm just going to be real. We had a huge battle with the Access Center because, as a friend said, there's two kinds of access centers: the ones that fight for the rights of the university and profits, and the ones that fight for their students. And we had number one. And the D Center was in this like storage closet that was across the hallway from the Access Center. And I would be like, do you want to tell your students about, Eli Claire's coming to speak? And they were like, we don't see how that's relevant. And right, yeah, or, any of the workshops we did or anything. So I would say fight for disabled space on campus. And I would say part of DJ is really, okay, so right now, most universities have a model where, if you want your accommodations, you have to go to the Access Center with your proof that you're not lying about being disabled. So a lot of people, especially a lot of BIPOC people, don't necessarily have that proof. I didn't fucking have it in college. I had to limp a mile from, wherever I could get parking at Mills because they were like, you don't have proof. We can't actually give you a parking spot. And I could go on. But so I would say fight that gatekeeping model. Like, I mean, yeah, the ADA exists and there's a standard way where a lot of access centers are set up to demand proof. They're moving from a model of like, disabled people are always lying, so you've got to prove you're not. And we can't give accommodations to everybody. What would happen? So you can just actually make an access center that doesn't move on those rules. And also, I've seen a lot of professors I know and lecturers be like, yeah, I'm going to leave off that kind of crappy, basic little paragraph in my syllabus that goes like, we are required to follow the ADA. You must submit your access requirements 6 weeks in advance of the center. And they just say, hey, so we're creating a learning space together and we all have access needs. We can do an access check-in or not. But if you have access needs or realities that are just always there or that come up during the class, just come talk to me. We will work it out. Because that centers that a lot of people are really shy about seeing their access needs because they've been punished for them. A lot of people don't know what the fuck their body's going to do any minute or their mind. And, I remember the first 12 times someone did an access check-in. I was like, I'm fine. I don't need anything. Maybe I need a chair. As long as I'm not dead, I'm fine. So I think really understanding the shame and the fact that so many people have had to mask and pass to survive, right? And creating space for that. I do want to say it's a mixed bag, but we can see with the coronavirus pandemic, everything can be on Zoom, captioned, and with ASL. So offering that, and I'm thinking about a Medium article that I just was reading about the other day that was about temporal accessibility, that was talking about like time spoons and how even at home with Zoom and captioning and ASL, a lot of us are just like, well, I just threw up for 6 hours. So even with that really nicely accessible Zoom event, I'm not going to make it. Because, so I think looking at like really unpacking synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And I think teach disabled skills, teach disabled writers and activists and theorists who are Black and brown. Like, don't just teach, you know, 5 minutes of white disability, you know, talk about the we, you know, talk about crypt brilliance, talk about crypt vulnerability, find those genealogies and lineages and teach those writers. Really just know that the work is to continue to be like, who are the disabled writers, thinkers, creators that are out there, and to teach about them and us, and to really think about what is going to support disabled students on campus, which is everything from childcare to, you know, non-gate kept disabled scholarships to really just dismantling everything. I mean, I think a lot about the deep ableism in medical school, for example, and in a lot of other helping professions, how inaccessible those trainings are for disabled students, first of all, and how we are taught as that people in those courses are taught that disabled people are a defect to be eliminated, and how different it would be if that was transformed, and how that needs to happen like yesterday. So yeah, that and unions and support the disabled sex working students on campus, and Sesta Fosta. So many disabled students do sex work to put ourselves through school because it's accessible, you know, like, don't put us in jail. So many disabled folks are parenting and caregiving, support our relationships. Don't make your disabled student tell you about their colitis in the, you know, and then tell them, oh no, I know everything about your disability because I watched the movie of the week. I'm going to tell you what access you need, which happens all the time. Don't make people disclose what their disability is. It's like Stacy said to you, Joe, it's like, just ask them what their access needs are, right? Build the access in from the beginning, not as an afterthought. That's it. Don't be a douche.
I think that's a fantastic place to end it, unless you want to add anything, Joe.
No, I think that was terrific. Yeah, no, that was terrific.
I think that's a fantastic place to end it, especially because
I don't have an academic job, though.
because Leah carried the entire event, and I'm sure is going to need a long nap after this. So I just want to again thank Leah for being here and talking about Stacey Milbern's life with us. Please do, if you weren't familiar with Stacy before you came to the event tonight, please do check out some of the links that were posted in the chat, and check out the Stacy Taught Us syllabus. There's a ton of great speeches, interviews, quotes. And if you're an academic, please incorporate that into your teaching. And I also want to thank Joe for moderating tonight and contributing his own thoughts and memories of Stacey's life. I want to thank our interpreters, Elise and Jojo. Thank you again. And to our captioner, Erin. Thank you to everybody who attended tonight. There were some excellent questions that we didn't get to, and I hope to be in continued conversation with you either in the virtual world or are at SDSU. Thank you so much.
Can I ask one quick question? There's, will the chat be saved and included somehow?
That's a good question. I can send that out along with the link to the recording.
Thank you.
Great idea. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jess, for organizing this.
Thank you, Jess, for organizing this.
This was incredible.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And the style game, the shoes. Stacy had incredible style. Thank you, Moya. Hi, Moya.
It's true.
It was so beautiful. You remember that time she like got her keratin on it and she was like, okay, I'm gonna try on 7 different outfits. And then she was like, am I your most fan client? And the person was like, yeah, you are. Oh,
That sounds right.
Yeah. I don't want to go. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I hope I did her justice. Hi,
I
Gretchen.
think so.
Sorry,
Yeah.
this is me waving at the chat.